Well, I've been in sport for about 25 years and frankly just stumbled into it after being a graduate trainee following graduating from Leeds back in 1986, going into a graduate trainee programme as it was then. Unfortunately, students don't have those luxuries these days. And then from that marketing discipline, I started in Ladbroke Racing, which was my foot in the door in sport. And then it went through the NFL, Scottish Premier League, the Oval at cricket, bit of time in Rugby League, the Surrey Sports Park, which was a multi-sport venue at the University of Surrey, and that brought me into the multi-sport world. And then for the last 6 months I've been Chief Executive of Commonwealth Games England. My primary role here is severalfold. One is very much in relationship management, because we liaise with 25 sports, of which 17 will feature at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. So we need to make sure that we are working very closely with all those sports at all levels, at chair, CEO, performance director, and right through that sport. So that's one key element. The second element is obviously games planning. It's a huge logistical operation to actually move 550 athletes and coaches and support staff 10,000 miles across 17 sports to actually deliver the games in 2018. So that is a huge logistical task. And the third element, which all sports face and all people in my position face, is revenue generation. You know, that market is tough at the moment. Understandably, funding is much more of a challenge. So we have to present ourselves as a very credible commercial opportunity for brands to get involved, and we are interesting and we are different, but revenue generation is a key part of what I do. You can imagine that the cycle of going to the Gold Coast is significantly more expensive than going to Glasgow, and that needs to be funded properly. I think Glasgow breathed new life into the Commonwealth Games. I think it was struggling a little bit after Delhi, but Glasgow was a phenomenal success. The Scots did a great job in putting that event on the back of London 2012. So that was helpful because it was much higher profile. I think the public fell back in love with the Commonwealth Games. So that gave our strategy some stimulus. But really what we're looking at, which is slightly different now, is we're looking very much over a 2-game cycle. Traditionally, you've just looked from one games to the next. We're looking at a 2-game cycle, which takes in Gold Coast and then on to Durban, and how we generate commercial partnerships over that period of time that are sustainable. Well, probably the biggest challenge that any federation's got is funding. You know, that you need to fund an infrastructure of athletes, coaches, support staff, travel and everything else, and that is becoming progressively more expensive. Athletes' expectations are a lot higher than they've ever been, and that's quite right as well. And so that needs to be funded properly, so the programmes need to be in place so that the right infrastructure is there. Otherwise, your athletes and your coaches and everybody else frankly cannot compete on a world stage, which we need to do so. There is a whole raft of other challenges, as you would expect, of running any business that involves a lot of people, and just making sure that the right programmes are in place, the right personnel are in place, the right relationships are in place, your relationships with the relevant other governing bodies or funding partners or other international federations are absolutely critical as well, because ultimately you're going to need their help at some point. Well, with any major multi-sport tournament, there is a significant recruitment programme that goes on, and we're just over 2 years out, and we're actually starting that programme now. So we will be looking for a range of individuals, a lot of operational, logistical staff. We'll be bolstering the marketing, commercial operations. We'll be looking for general support staff. Much closer to the games, there is a huge additional support staff that's taken on to support each of the athletes across the 17 sports. Doctors, physios, team leaders, you know, the list is endless. And so you go from a very small team as we are now to a much bigger team, and then obviously post games that goes back to a smaller team as you build for the next tournament. I think that's probably something you ask the staff rather than ask me, but I think, you know, from my perspective, I hope that I'm seen as someone who understands the industry, so is going to make well-informed decisions, is somebody who will lead from the front whenever that's relevant, prepared to get your hands dirty whenever that's relevant, I think you need to have an understanding, certainly in this role, you need to have an understanding and a sensitivity of the needs of the sports, because we're dealing with 17 different sports, and there's a huge difference from perhaps lawn bowls to boxing, so that takes quite a deep understanding. And I think you need to establish the trust of people as well, because ultimately, you are, or I am leading a very large operation to the Gold Coast, and people have to have faith and trust that I and the team and the support staff can do that. I think it is. It's twofold really. It's to network effectively. To make sure that you've got a profile within the industry, to try and attend as many sort of broad-based events as you can. And when you do move on, as inevitably you do move on, don't burn your bridges, because in this industry it is quite small.